Hey guys, and welcome back to the Spruce and Linen channel. I'm Janelle, and today I'm going to teach you how to make these beautiful woven wreaths. These would be a great project to make for your mom for Mother's Day, or maybe you just want to make it for yourself. Either way, I think they're really beautiful and perfect for spring. So let's get started. Here's what you're going to need for this project. First and foremost, you're going to need a wreath form. This one I picked up at the dollar store, but I've also seen them at Michael's, and most craft stores will have something like this. It needs to be this wire type with multiple rows of wire. You're gonna want some sort of surface to do your needle felting onto so that you're not hurting your table. Trust me, these needles are extremely sharp, so you're gonna want something to protect your table. I am just using a cutting mat. You're gonna need a pair of scissors, felting needles, of course. I picked these up at Michael's craft stores. Most craft stores and a lot of yarn and fiber companies carry them. Optional is a piece of ribbon to hang your wreath from when you're done. You're gonna need some sort of nice wide eye darning needle, and then a few different colors of roving. I got these from Divinity Fibers. I know you guys are always curious to know where I got them from, and that's where these ones came from. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to weave the entire background, the base of the wreath. I'm using this really thick white merino wool, so I'm actually going to split it in half, but if your merino is thinner, you could just use the full thickness if you like. So I'm going to get a pretty long piece, but not too excessive, because sometimes as you're weaving through these sections, it does want to sort of start fuzzing up your wool. So I'm going to take about an arm length. So then I'm going to split my wool. You can see that mine is really full and really thick, and I've shown this in other videos, but I'll show it again. You're just going to try to find kind of the natural spot where it's starting. It wants to kind of split in half, so I'm going to go with this. Close enough. And just gently split that wool in half. So then I'm going to just start simply weaving the roving around this frame. The biggest thing with this, in order to hide the metal frame, is that you want to weave the roving really tight together so that it hides all the wire. Now, if you want to go one step further, you could spray paint this form the color of the roving you're using, but it's definitely not necessary. Okay, so you can see here I have woven one section. There's all these little crossbars around the wreath, and I've woven 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rows. And that looks nice and full to me. So I'm gonna just make sure that I weave the same amount of rows in each section so that it looks nice and even all the way around. Done weaving the main part of this wreath, I'm going to flip it over and tuck in all of these ends. This is where you're going to want a nice big eye needle, and possibly even something that's a little bit flexible like this plastic one, so that you can easily weave your ends back in. So I'm just going to go back through some of these loops here. Just a couple of them is enough, especially since this is something that is got quite a structure to it. It's not going to pull out easily at all. And then once you have the end tucked in, you can cut off the excess. Now we have all the ends tucked in, so we're left with this nice clean front. And you can see there are little areas where the wire might be showing through, so you can kind of spread your merino out a little bit more. Make sure it's evenly spread out, and that mostly hides it. Like I said, if that's something that bothers you, I think it hides it just fine, but if that's something that bothers you, if you were using white merino, you could always spray paint the form white before you start. Now we are on to the fun part. We're going to start putting our flowers on there. I wanted to show you this one that I've already made just to kind of give you an idea of what I'm going for. You, of course, could design this any way you like. You could put flowers on the whole thing. You could just sporadically put them. There's lots of different ideas for this. I'm gonna show you this method as it's just like a nice, quick and easy way to do this. I think this would make a fantastic Mother's Day gift, or would be really, really beautiful in a little girl's room or a nursery. So as I mentioned before, these needles are extremely sharp, so please be very careful when you're doing this, especially if you haven't used them before. So now I'm looking at my wreath and I'm going to choose, I think, this area to put on my flowers because everything else looks really even, but there's something a little weird going on here, so I'm just gonna cover that up with flowers. For these flowers, again, depending on the way you're designing it, because I'm going to do my flowers in a cluster, I have to make sure that they're not too full. If you were just doing one flower here and there, you could make them as big as you want. So I'm gonna start figuring out how I want to do these flowers. If I want to do, well, they're all going to be touching, so you don't, because I'm doing 3, all the colors are touching. I think I'm going to do blue on the inside and then the orange and the yellow kind of more on the outside. So I'm going to start with my inside flower, and this wool has already been split in half. You can tell that this is a thinner piece. You're definitely going to want to make sure you do that first, because a full thickness like this is going to give you like a really, really full petal. So if you're going to spread out just one flower, you could do it this way, but otherwise I would split it into quarters. That's what I did here, and that worked out really well. Now I believe this particular merino is only split in half, but it's looking thin enough that I think I can make that work. So I'm going to take out one of my felting needles. And essentially, if you've never done needle felting is essentially knotting up the hairs of the wool. It is not a fully permanent way of felting. Wet felting is. And if you guys are interested in wet felting, make sure you let me know in the comments below if you want to see a tutorial on wet felting. But today we're going to do needle felting. And this is really, really basic. We're not getting too fancy here. There's lots of different methods with needle felting. Some people make beautiful, so realistic, almost painting looking things, but today we're just using this as a way to attach our flowers to our wreath. So I'm gonna just take the end and I'm gonna just start felting that in. This is a bit of a process, and see, you can see that I'm hitting onto the mat. That's why you want something there. And I'm basically just knotting that up into the wool here. And you don't have to go too crazy because again, this is a wreath. It's not gonna be, you know, handled too much once it's hung up. And then I'm going to just start shaping into my first petal. So I like the way that that works. I kind of twisted it and turned it, and you can just kind of fiddle around with it until it looks the way you want it to. And then I'm going to felt some more, and I'm always going into the same center area for this. And again, I'm not going too crazy with my felting because we're doing it so many times. So then I'm going to make another petal. I like the way that looks. For this particular project, I really like 5 petals. 4 is too symmetrical, and any more than that, it's going to get really bulky. You also want to be careful not to stab down into your surface too hard because these do have a tendency to break as well. So I'm just being gentle and trying not to go too far down with that. And then you can see that you can just kind of keep reshaping the petals. I'm just gonna continue on here, just to see what this is gonna look like. It's definitely not an exact process, which I think is actually really great because no two flowers look completely identical, so I like the kind of organic feel of these flowers. And I am purposefully leaving, hopefully you can see this okay, I'm kind of creating a nice flat surface in the middle for when we put the center of the flower. I probably could have split my wool one more time here, because it is a little bit bulky, but we'll just make sure it's nice and felted down. All right, and so now I'm gonna do my very last petal for this first flower. I think that looks pretty good there. You can kind of shift them around just to get them to where you like them. And for this last petal, once I have it felted a little bit in the center, I'm going to cut the excess off, like so. Set that color aside, and now I'm gonna go ahead and felt all of that in. Oops. You guys caught me in the act of breaking my needle, and I better go find the end before we step on it. So I broke a needle. So this means you for sure want to make sure you have more than one before you start a needle felting project, because it happens. I think it's basically because they're really thin and really hard needles, and so sometimes when your wool gets really thick is when they're gonna start to break. So I'm gonna be a little bit more careful now because I do have a really thick surface here. And basically with felting needles, if you look really closely at them, they have tiny little burrs on the side. And that's what helps the felting process, because it's essentially just helping it knot up a little bit more. All right, so I like the way that that's looking, and now I'm gonna put a center in this flower. I think I'm gonna do a yellow, should I do a yellow center? I think I'm gonna do the yellow. So I'm just gonna take off a little bit. You don't need very much for this part. And I'm gonna kind of ball it up in my fingers, just so I have kind of a round-ish shape. And I'm gonna start felting that in. And you can do that part, the center of your flower, as much or as little as you like. Again, this process isn't fully permanent. Like if I really wanted to, I could just pull this off, which wouldn't be great, but just basically knotting that up there a little bit. And I like the way that looks. I like that there's a bit of texture to it. It kind of looks more realistic. And that's our first flower. And now I'm gonna move on to doing the next two. So I think I'll go in with this beautiful pink terracotta color. And to figure out the length, I'm just gonna kind of, so that's 3, 4, 5. So that's how I'm gonna figure out how long of a piece I want to pull off. Oh, this is finer merino, so you have to spread your hands way apart. There we go. I'm gonna split that in half. And this time I am going to split that in half again. This definitely gets a little bit thick. So my next flower, I kind of want to end up in this area. So it's gonna be a little more off to this other side of the wreath, and then my third one will go right here. So again, same process. This time I'm gonna actually cut this off a little more blunt, just so I have a bit of a thicker piece to start felting. And I'm just gonna start right here, finding a spot where there's like a good amount of wool, and just start felting that in. And then I'm gonna create my first petal. And you can see I'm kind of letting it twist and turn and just kind of playing with the wool until it gets to kind of the shape that I think will look good. Now I'm almost thinking I should have gone for the half. It is thicker, but I think I'm gonna switch that, so I'm not gonna do the quarters. So you're gonna see me pull this off. See how that just comes right out? It's still knotted at this end, but. So I'm gonna say use a half thickness of your merino, not a quarter, because I do like how full this flower looks, and I want the other two to have a similar look. So I'm just gonna start that over. Undo and redo, as I always say. If it's not looking right, don't be afraid to take it apart and try again. All right, so that was my last petal. So once again, got that felted in there a little bit, and I'm going to just carefully cut off the excess and start felting that end in. Alright, so I'm liking the look of that. And now I'm going to do the center of this flower. So since I'm using 3 different colors, I'm going to use a different color center for each one. So I'm going to use the blue for the center of this terracotta one. And I'll just show you again, just pulling a small amount off and just sort of start balling it in between your fingers. Shaping it there. That might even be too much, so if that's the case, I'm just going to take some of it away. You can always add more after if it doesn't feel like it's enough. I'll set that in there. And I can feel that that end is real thick, so once you get to that thickness, just take it easy with your needles just to prevent breaking them, because especially in this time, it's taking a long time to order things online, so I'm just going to be really careful here. I like the way that's looking. Alright, so we have one more flower to go. I'm absolutely loving the way this looks, and as you can see as I'm going, there's definitely not any sort of perfectness about it, or perfection, I guess is the right word. And that's the beauty of it, because I mean, no flower, or most flowers, like, they're not perfect. They're not perfectly symmetrical. The leaves aren't all identical in size. So I'm kind of just leaning into that. And this one, I want to give these flowers a little bit of space. So I'm going to start the middle, right here. And I can feel that that's in between 2 bars this time, so that's going to be a little easier than this one, but that one I didn't really have a whole lot of options for where to put it. So you can probably tell by now why I only chose to do 3 flowers, because they are a little bit tedious, but I love the way they look. And if you have a lot of time on your hands, filling this whole piece with flowers would be so beautiful. And I should mention as well, the reason this one is working out a little bit better with only splitting the wool in half is because on this, you can tell like this one is a smaller frame, so I didn't have quite as much room, so I think this one worked out really well using an even thinner piece of the roving. But it's all up to you how you want your flowers to come out, if you want them a little thinner or a little fuller. As always, you do you. Figure out what you think looks best. All right, so now I'm ready to put the last center in. So I'm going to use the terracotta for the center of this one. It just kind of brings a bit of cohesion to this piece when we're using all the same 3 colors, and then I'm kind of doing the same color of center, but you could also like just do white centers or whatever way you want to do. I always like bringing as much cohesion with my color as I can so it doesn't feel too wild, but that's just me. I'm kind of reserved with color, I would say. Don't want to go too crazy with the felting of that center. Just enough that it's in there. And then like I said, you can kind of move these around, and that's it. Oh my goodness. I really like the way this one turned out. It's definitely easier the second time. So with everything, practice is key. So I'm going to put away my needle so I don't stab myself with it later. Now I just had this ribbon from a picture frame that I had, and I think it's really beautiful, so I'm going to use that to hang this from. I'm going to cut it a little bit shorter. But of course you could use a string, or really you could use a piece of leather, like anything that you want for the ends of this. I'm just tapering the ends of my ribbon. And I've seen wreaths a lot lately being hung this way. Wrap that around there. And then I'm just going to tie a little knot. Of course, I twisted it. And there is my finished wreath. I'll definitely be posting photos of this, so make sure you come over to Instagram to see a photo version of this, but I think this is really beautiful. I like the effect of keeping the roving unfelted to just give it that really full look. I'm really happy with this. I hope you guys have a lot of fun, and make sure you tag me on Instagram if you try out this project, and you can also use our hashtag #SLWeavingClub. And there you have it, a woven wreath, perfect gift for Mother's Day, or maybe you just want to make it yourself, whatever works. If you like this video, please hit that like button, subscribe, and click the bell to get notifications when I post new videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. I didn't even mess up much in this one, so sorry about your luck with bloopers, guys.